He's mopping the marble again. This is a high-visibility zone, Camilla Rothschild snapped, heels clicking like gunfire as she stepped into the executive lobby. Can someone tell the janitor to clean somewhere that doesn't scream low-class energy on camera? Malik Hayes didn't flinch. He didn't look up. He just moved his mop one last time over the glistening white floor beneath the glass wall of the 43rd floor boardroom and gently wrung it dry. Then, quietly, he placed a clear plastic jar on the window ledge beside the potted fern. It had a folded note inside, scrawled in pink crayon. For Daddy's dream, love, Naomi. Camilla didn't notice, but the head of investor relations did. Hey, Cam, he murmured under his breath. That janitor? Tip jars probably got more soul than this whole damn floor. Drop a like if you've ever wanted to stand up to unreasonable rules like this, and subscribe to see how this strategy plays out. She didn't laugh. She adjusted her cream-colored Givenchy blazer and narrowed her eyes. He's still in the frame. Move him, or I swear I'll personally deduct his hourly from whoever hired him. Malik exhaled slowly and pulled back the mop like it was a sword he didn't want to swing. He nodded once toward the assistant director, then began rolling the mop cart away. That's when she walked past him. Camilla Rothschild. Black pencil skirt. Designer heels that hadn't touched public pavement in years. Her perfume was engineered arrogance, citrus-edged. Her security detail parted the hallway like royalty, and she didn't even see him. But he saw her. And the screen behind her. Live investor feed. Multiple logins from offshore IPS. The kind of metadata you only notice when you've built the system yourself. His name used to be in that corner office. He had helped design the company's first secure cloud when Camilla was still fighting her prep school uniform policy. But that was a lifetime ago, before the burnout, before the cover-up, before Naomi's mother collapsed at her desk from a 12-hour overnight QA audit. Now, Malik mopped marble floors. Not because he couldn't return, but because he refused to. He never corrected anyone who called him custodian. He didn't mind the stares when he took the bus to work. And when Naomi asked why he didn't do big computer things anymore, he told her the truth. Because some people use power to hide things. I'd rather use mine to build something that matters. She nodded and went back to soldering her little robot. So Malik cleaned, quietly, thoroughly. And when people dropped quarters in his jar, he smiled. Not because he needed the money, but because it taught Naomi the value of humility without shame. That morning, he had cleaned the data closet twice, checked the temperature of the server floor without touching a key, watched Julian, the IT manager, get brushed aside as usual, watched Camilla ignore the subtle error logs, and still, he said nothing, because some warnings are best left ignored until they can't be anymore. Where are you watching from? You might want to stay tuned, because this CEO, she just dismissed the one man who understands exactly how her empire was built, and how fast he could collapse it, if he wanted to. Camilla's stilettos clicked a final time before she vanished behind the smoked glass doors of the 43rd floor boardroom, her entourage in tow. Behind her, Malik paused near the elevator bay, one hand still resting on the handle of his mop cart. The hallway buzzed faintly with recycled air and artificial polish, but Malik's gaze lingered on the closed boardroom, where the screens behind the glass flickered through presentation slides. Every line of that deck, every line of code running beneath it, he recognized like muscle memory. Not because he'd seen it before, because he'd written its original framework. Malik turned without a word and pushed his cart down the back corridor, past the executive pantry, where a junior associate wrinkled her nose and pulled her oat milk away from the cleaning supplies like it might catch humility. He didn't react, not to the looks, not to the glances, not to the whispers that followed him like shadows. In the janitor's closet, he slipped off the gloves, washed his hands with deliberate calm, and pulled out a small tablet from beneath the bottom shelf. It was wrapped in an old lunch bag. A modest screen lit up with an outdated but deeply customized dashboard, his personal diagnostic tool, patched together from archived scripts and code he never stopped perfecting. Atlas Corp's network integrity report blinked back at him. It was degrading faster than any of them realized. Back in the boardroom, Camilla stood at the head of the table with the self-assuredness of someone born to podiums. A panoramic window cast gold across the high-polished table as she spoke about innovation, agility, trust. Words that glittered, words that meant nothing. Julian sat 2 seats down, tapping furiously at a slim console as another warning pinged quietly in his queue. File versions duplicating inconsistently. Background logins fluttering from overseas. The system was bleeding data. "Camilla," he said softly, voice cracking. "I think we need to pause the live feed for just a minute. No," she cut him off without turning her head. "We don't pause, not with investors on the line. Figure it out, Julian. You've had 6 figures worth of certifications thrown at you. Use them." Her smile snapped back into place before facing the camera. "As I was saying, what sets Atlas Corp apart is our core architecture, unbreachable, elegant, secure by design." Malik's finger hovered above a blinking node on his tablet screen. It represented the main switchboard traffic redirect, the same pathway that handled remote access privileges. It was now at 70% saturation, which meant someone was in, right now, quietly siphoning packets. The system had maybe 20 minutes before it began manifesting live corruption, and nobody up there saw it coming. He folded the tablet closed and placed it back in the bag, then pulled out a folded napkin, Naomi's crayon scribbles still fresh. "Good luck, Daddy, and Robot Girl." A small schematic of a robot she'd designed with tiny antennae and a smiley face peeked out beneath the lettering. That napkin stayed in his shirt pocket. Always. Downstairs, the associate cafeteria blared muted news anchors and clinked dishes. Malik grabbed a bottled water and sat near the service exit, away from foot traffic. The building hum was different now, colder. Camilla's voice echoed faintly from the overhead monitors. Julian, in the background, was starting to sweat. Another ping struck the IT console. Julian cursed under his breath. Behind him, Camilla gestured wide. "We believe in transparency," she said. "That's why we're holding this quarterly update open to our board, our shareholders, and our most elite investors in real time." She didn't notice the flicker of red across the bottom third of the screen. But Malik did. The countdown had started. A silent breach timer embedded deep. It was elegant. Too elegant. Whoever designed it knew Atlas Corp's framework intimately, which meant they either had access to the old source archives, or they were part of its history. His history. He took one last drink of water, stood, and dusted off his pants. Across the lobby, 2 interns snickered as he passed, one whispering loud enough to be heard. "Isn't it weird they let janitors on the 43rd floor? I mean, can't they, clean around real meetings?" "Maybe he's union or something," the other laughed. "Low-class energy." He didn't stop, didn't look, just walked back toward the elevator and pressed the call button. As the doors opened, he caught his reflection, just a tired man in a dark blue jumpsuit with a tip-jar smile and calloused hands. But behind that, a map of the entire system was unfolding, and the breach was growing teeth. Malik stepped in and pressed the button for the 43rd floor. The elevator glided upward, smooth and soundless, but Malik's chest tightened with each floor it passed. 41, 42. The soft chime rang as the doors opened to the executive corridor, and the hum of voices spilled out. A different hum followed, one only he could hear. The low, insistent vibration of systems under strain. The boardroom was alive with lights and applause. Camilla stood at the head of the table, the backdrop of the skyline painting her in golden superiority. Cameras perched on tripods, a dozen faces framed on screens for the live stream. She was mid-sentence, savoring her words like they were champagne. "A future built on trust and resilience," she announced. "Atlas Corp doesn't just innovate. We secure the future." Julian sat hunched at the far end, his console glowing with error notifications. His tie hung loose, and his fingers hovered nervously over the keys. He leaned closer to his mic. "Camilla, I think you need to see this. We're getting foreign traffic in the—" She cut him off without glancing over. "Julian, please, don't embarrass us on camera. Handle it quietly." Her voice oozed calm for the investors. For him, it was a blade. Julian's jaw locked. He tapped furiously, trying patch after patch, but the alerts kept multiplying. He risked a glance toward the glass wall, where Malik stood with his cart. For a fraction of a second, their eyes met. Malik knew what he saw: a man drowning, a man who had been waving a flag nobody bothered to read. He lowered his gaze and kept moving, his mop gliding across the floor with steady strokes. The servers behind the wall groaned, faint enough that only someone listening for it would notice. The cooling system ticked harder than usual. Camilla didn't hear. She was too busy gesturing to the room about visionary leadership and strategic expansion. Malik passed a wall screen where the network diagnostics flickered, just for a blink. To anyone else, it was a meaningless stutter. To him, it was confirmation. The breach was escalating. He crouched as if to wring out the mop, but instead slipped his tablet from the cart. Shielding it from view, he tapped a sequence. His custom overlay bloomed across the small screen: packet loss rates, server reroutes, ghost logins. He watched the activity climb, like a storm building offshore. He muttered under his breath. 15 minutes, maybe less. From the boardroom, Camilla's laugh rang out. She held her champagne glass aloft, because of course she would drink mid-presentation. "We're untouchable," she said. "No competitor can match our infrastructure." Malik nearly smiled, not out of humor, but at the irony. Untouchable? They were already being touched, prodded, gutted. He tucked the tablet away again before anyone noticed. Julian pushed back from his chair, face pale. "Camilla, if we don't act right now, we risk—" "Enough!" she snapped, her polished nails tapping the table. "We are live. Investors don't want to hear about risks. They want confidence. Sit down." He sank into his chair, defeated. Malik slid his mop across the final stretch of marble, but his mind was already calculating. If the breach spread to the investor feed, the humiliation wouldn't just be internal, it would be global. They'd lose billions in confidence overnight. Camilla would still have her trust fund to land on. Julian might lose his job. Thousands of workers beneath them would lose more. And Naomi? Naomi would see her father standing by, letting it all fall apart when he could have stopped it. The elevator dinged behind him, and a group of interns spilled out, carrying trays of coffee. Their whispers, carried in the polished corridor. "CEO looks fire today," one murmured. "Imagine being that powerful at 30. Another smirked. Meanwhile, janitor's out here polishing the floor she walks on. They laughed, brushing past Malik without a glance. One of them clipped his mop bucket with a shoe, spilling a few drops of dirty water onto the marble. They didn't notice. He bent, wiped it clean, and kept moving. But he felt the weight of their words, the same echo Camilla had thrown at him. Low-class energy, invisible, replaceable. Malik reached into his pocket and touched the folded napkin Naomi had drawn on. The crayon lines of her robot schematic were smudged, but her words remained bright. "For Daddy's dream." He inhaled slowly. Control, patience, timing. Not yet. In the boardroom, Camilla launched into her closing flourish, flashing a smile toward the cameras. Atlas Corp is not just a company, it's a fortress, and this fortress is stronger than ever. Behind her, Julian's console lit up blood red. A siren tone whispered through his headset. He froze. His eyes darted to Malik again, desperate, pleading. Malik gave nothing away. He rolled his cart toward the janitor's closet at the far end of the hall. But inside, the storm on his tablet was almost ready to break. The janitor's closet door closed with a muted click, sealing Malik away from the noise of the executive floor. In the quiet, he leaned his mop against the wall and set his cart aside. The smell of ammonia lingered in the cramped space, sharp and earthy. But, beneath it, he heard the steady hum of servers through the vent system, rattling like a trapped animal. He pulled the tablet from its hiding place again. The custom dashboard was alive with alerts. Unauthorized access had slipped through a gap in the network's backbone, spreading like a parasite. Each red dot was another terminal compromised. Each flashing line was another leak in a dam no one upstairs had the will, or the knowledge, to patch. Malik tapped to zoom, his fingers steady though his chest grew tight. The breach wasn't random, it was surgical. Someone with intimate familiarity of Atlas Corp's infrastructure was slicing into its most vulnerable arteries. He let out a slow breath. It's too deliberate. This isn't some kid with a script. Whoever's behind this, they've studied me. The thought didn't rattle him, but it did harden his jaw. He'd left this world behind after Naomi's mother had collapsed at her desk from exhaustion. Malik had resigned, walked out, and sworn he'd never serve the machine again. The machine had chewed her up. He wasn't about to feed it more of himself. Still, he couldn't shake the truth flashing on his screen. Atlas Corp had minutes, maybe less, before the breach reached the live investor feed. Once that happened, every promise Camilla had made would crumble into dust in real time, and the fallout wouldn't touch her first. It would strike the people buried at the bottom, the assistants, the junior staff, the families depending on those paychecks, and Naomi. She'd know he let it happen. The tablet chimed with a fresh alert. Malik swiped it away and tucked the device back under the shelf, covering it with a rag. For now, silence was his armor. He had time to think. Time to weigh. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a simple text from Naomi's school. Pickup reminder, 3:30 p.m. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting that tether anchor him. Naomi, with her boundless sketches, her robots with crooked arms and smiling faces. She'd faced ridicule just yesterday for showing her classmates a drawing of her cleaning robot. They had laughed at her the way the executives laughed at him, but she hadn't stopped dreaming. And what would he be teaching her now, if he walked away? Malik rinsed his hands at the tiny sink, splashing water on his face. The reflection staring back from the cracked mirror was not the one the executives saw. They saw a man in coveralls. He saw the director of security operations he used to be, the one who had architected Atlas Corp's first firewall, the one who had written policies these arrogant heirs barely understood. He pulled the napkin from his pocket and smoothed it out. Naomi's crayon lines glowed with stubborn hope. He folded it again and placed it in his shirt, directly over his heart. Then he straightened. Back in the boardroom, the applause swelled as Camilla wrapped up her presentation. Investors clapped from across the world, their video feeds flickering like a wall of approval. But the applause was hollow against the creeping shadow on Julian's console. His hands trembled, sweat darkened his collar. "Camilla," he whispered, leaning toward her as the cameras cut to a different angle. "We've lost admin control over half the servers. I can't stop it." Her eyes flashed. "Then find someone who can," she hissed, still smiling at the lens. Julian's gaze darted through the glass, toward the janitor's closet at the far end of the hall. Malik emerged at that exact moment, his cart rolling softly across the marble. To anyone else, it was a meaningless coincidence, but Julian's expression shifted from despair to something else, a flicker of hope, quickly buried under fear. Malik didn't break stride. He moved like a shadow, his expression unreadable. The world could collapse around him, and still he would not raise his voice. That was the luxury of someone who knew more than he let on. He passed beneath the glowing screens one final time, catching a glimpse of the breach as it crawled toward the live stream. For the first time, the investors themselves began to frown as their feeds stuttered and froze. One or two asked, "Are we losing connection?" Camilla waved it off, her laugh brittle. "Just a hiccup. We're stronger than ever." But the marble floor beneath her heels trembled, not from her authority, but from the strain of a system about to crack open. Malik parked the cart against the far wall and leaned on the mop handle, the image of calm. Yet, in his pocket, his phone buzzed again, another alert from his tablet. The breach had accelerated, 5 minutes, maybe less. The fortress was falling. The first sign was subtle, a brief flicker across the massive projection wall. The investors watching remotely thought it was a glitch in their own connection. Camilla ignored it, smiling with polished poise as she raised her glass again. But Malik knew better. From the corner of the hall, he adjusted the mop handle in his grip, the polished wood cool against his palm. His tablet vibrated once from beneath the rag in his cart. He didn't need to check, he already knew. The breach had advanced. The external feed was now being touched. Inside the boardroom, Julian's console chirped a warning that made him jolt upright. He typed furiously, sweat dripping onto the keys. The screen bloomed with red text, "Integrity compromised." He swallowed hard and leaned closer to Camilla. "We're hemorrhaging files," he whispered. "This isn't small. They're pulling the core investor deck right out of the system, live." Camilla's smile didn't falter for the camera. Her eyes cut toward him like knives. "Do not interrupt me again," she hissed. Then louder for the audience, "Atlas Corp has never been more secure." The contradiction burned. Malik heard it like static in his ears, the same way he once heard executives promising employees sustainable schedules while ordering 12-hour shifts. Empty words gilded in gold. Another flicker crossed the screens. This time, investors frowned. Murmurs spread through the boardroom. Someone's camera feed cut out, then returned. The doubt was visible now. Julian's hand trembled as he typed a desperate sequence, trying to reroute the intrusion. But the breach anticipated him. It pivoted, burrowed deeper, and stripped his access in seconds. His console went black. He froze, staring at the lifeless screen. It's gone." His voice cracked, almost childlike. Malik stepped closer, pushing his cart slowly. The wheels whispered against the marble, drawing no attention from most. But Julian's eyes tracked him. That flicker of hope returned, fighting its way through despair. He mouthed a word, almost imperceptible. "Help." Malik didn't answer. He simply set the mop back in the bucket and kept moving, his expression unchanged. But inside, his mind was calculating each path. Whoever had engineered this breach wasn't trying to destroy data. They were trying to humiliate, to unravel Camilla's entire narrative in front of the world. Camilla raised her hands theatrically to calm the murmurs. "Please, stay with us. What you're seeing is nothing more than temporary interference. Our infrastructure is as strong as ever." At that exact moment, the projection wall collapsed into chaos. Investor slides, warped into unreadable lines of code, foreign characters scrolling at dizzying speed. The sleek presentation was gone. In its place, a taunt blinked across the display in pulsing scarlet text. "Fortresses fall." Gasps filled the room. A few investors on screen cursed audibly, their feeds cutting out as they pulled connections. Panic crept like smoke. Julian's hands hovered uselessly over his console. His lips quivered. "We're live. The whole world's seeing this. Camilla, this is catastrophic." She slammed her hand on the table, silencing him. "Fix it." He stared at her, helpless. "I can't. We've lost all overrides." The room was unraveling, and Camilla's mask cracked. Rage burned in her eyes, her perfectly rehearsed control fraying at the edges. Yet, she still clung to image, still pretended authority. And all the while, Malik leaned casually against his cart at the far wall, watching. His tablet vibrated again, a steady rhythm like a ticking clock. The breach was accelerating faster than expected. Whoever sat on the other side of this attack was ruthless and brilliant. But they weren't untouchable. Malik knew every root directory Atlas Corp had ever built. He had written the skeleton before Camilla's family empire bought it out, before his resignation buried his name in forgotten archives. The attacker was using his blueprints, but Malik was the architect. He closed his eyes for a moment. Naomi's face flashed in his mind, her smile as she showed him her latest drawing. A robot with 2 arms holding shields. "This one protects people," she had said. He opened his eyes. The napkin over his chest felt heavier now. Julian's voice cracked again, louder this time. "We need outside support, Camilla. This isn't—" Her hand shot up, silencing him. "Do not say that word. Outsiders will not see us weak. Not ever." The irony was brutal. The outsiders already saw everything. Investors across the globe were watching the company crumble live. Malik stepped forward, one measured pace closer to the boardroom glass. No one noticed the movement, except Julian, whose eyes widened in desperate recognition. Malik tilted his head slightly toward the console, a gesture so small it could have been mistaken for a shift of balance. But Julian understood. Malik could stop this. Julian clenched his fists, torn between protocol and survival. His voice shook as he whispered under his breath. "Do it. Please." Inside the boardroom, panic reached a boiling point. Phones buzzed. Investors demanded answers. Camilla stood rigid, her smile stretched thin, her voice trembling under the weight of the lie. The fortress had 5 minutes left before collapse, and Malik Hayes was the only man in the building who still knew how to keep it standing. The boardroom erupted in chaos. Phones buzzed on silent, investors leaned toward their cameras demanding clarity, and Camilla's hand rose in vain to silence the rising tide of voices. Her perfect composure cracked into a sharp edge. "Julian, fix this!" she barked. Julian slammed his palm against his dead console. "I told you, we've lost control. They've hijacked everything." His voice trembled, desperation dripping through every word. The giant wall of screens continued to pulse with the intruder's taunt. Fortresses fall. Code cascaded in lines too fast to read. A waterfall of exposure no one in that room could stop. Camilla's assistants rushed forward, whispering frantic suggestions, none of them useful. "Should we cut the feed? What about rebooting the server? Maybe just end the call." "No!" Camilla roared. "Ending the feed will show weakness. We are not weak." Her words rang hollow as the system groaned audibly, cooling units kicking into overdrive. The hum reverberated through the vents, vibrating against the marble like a warning drum. Malik stood just outside the glass, his mop leaning against the wall, his hand resting in his pocket where the folded napkin pressed against his chest. His tablet vibrated again. 3 urgent pulses. He slipped it into his palm and glanced down. The breach had reached the core database. In less than 5 minutes, every single investor file would be dumped into the open stream. Bank account details, contracts, secrets people had paid millions to keep buried. And Camilla still didn't see it. Julian's eyes darted toward Malik again, wide with panic. "Camilla, we need outside help. Now!" She turned on him, her voice venomous. "If you say that again, you're finished here. Do you understand me? Finished." Julian swallowed his words, but his eyes flicked back toward Malik. It wasn't just hope anymore. It was a plea. Malik took one slow step closer to the glass, his reflection framed between collapsing streams of code. His thoughts burned. He could let it fall, let Atlas Corp choke on its arrogance. Camilla would face humiliation so complete she'd never recover. But the fallout would sweep beyond her. Workers would lose jobs. Families would break. His daughter would ask why he stood aside when he could have saved them. The choice was already made. He slid the janitor's closet key into the reader of a side maintenance console. It beeped. Access denied. He frowned. Old trick. He tapped 3 times against the reader, paused, then tapped again. The console hesitated, then opened, a back door he had coded years ago. Inside, a panel of diagnostics unfolded. Raw architecture lines stared back at him like an old friend. His fingers moved without hesitation. Override the breach path. Reclaim the firewall. Patch the root. His breathing slowed into rhythm with each keystroke. Behind the glass, Julian saw the auxiliary console come alive. His jaw dropped. It's him," he whispered. Camilla's head snapped toward him. "What?" Julian stood, pointing toward the hallway. "The janitor. He's doing something. Look." Camilla's lips curled into a sneer. "Are you insane? He's a mop boy, Julian. He doesn't know the first thing about—" Then she froze. Because the wall of collapsing code slowed. The lines began stabilizing, sections of red reverting to white. For the first time in the entire nightmare, the system was no longer spiraling. It was fighting back. Investors murmured, confusion replacing panic. One of them leaned into their camera. "Wait, what just happened? Is someone fixing this?" Julian's face glowed with relief. "Yes, someone is." Camilla's eyes narrowed. She stepped toward the glass, heels clicking hard on marble, and stared at Malik. He didn't look back. His fingers flew, commanding a symphony of defenses only he could conduct. The breach retaliated, flooding the screen with countercode. Malik smirked faintly. Predictable. His fingers struck faster, rerouting access and locking down the original entry point. The room behind him watched in stunned silence as their fortress fought for life. saved not by their CEO, not by her army of assistants, but by the man she had humiliated for mopping too close to her meeting. The system shuddered one last time, then steadied. The wall went still. The scarlet taunt vanished. Investor slides blinked back into place as though nothing had happened. A hush fell heavy. Camilla stood frozen, her face pale, staring at the janitor she had called low-class energy. And Malik Hayes finally looked up. His eyes met hers through the glass, calm, unshaken, carrying the weight of someone who knew exactly what he had just done. The fortress had not fallen, not yet. For a long moment, no one moved. The entire 43rd floor seemed to hold its breath, the only sound the faint whine of cooling fans straining against the heat of recovery. Malik withdrew his hands from the console, the screen still pulsing faintly with restored stability, and stood in silence. Inside the boardroom, every head turned toward him, not toward Camilla, not toward Julian, but toward the janitor in a faded blue jumpsuit who had just silenced a digital storm. Camilla was the first to break. She slammed her glass on the table so hard the stem snapped. "What is happening?" she demanded, her voice cracking under the weight of eyes no longer glued to her. "Who gave him access? Julian, explain this." Julian's throat bobbed. He pushed his glasses up with a shaking hand. "That wasn't me," he admitted softly. He's the one who stopped it. I was locked out, completely." A ripple of disbelief moved through the room. One of the investors on the feed leaned forward, frowning. "Excuse me, did he just say the janitor stopped a level 3 cyber attack?" Camilla's face flushed. "Don't be ridiculous. He's a cleaner, nothing more. Anyone with a key card could have..." She cut herself off as the console beeped again. On the main display, a clean notification appeared. Threat. Neutralized, data integrity restored, and beneath it, a string of administrator credentials blinked into existence. The name tied to those credentials was unmistakable. Hayes, M., Director of Security Operations, former. Gasps erupted across the table. Someone whispered, "Director?" Another voice muttered, "I thought he was..." and stopped short. Camilla went rigid. The title hung in the air like a gavel. Julian's voice trembled as he spoke, but there was steel beneath it now. "Malik Hayes built this system, years ago, before you inherited the CEO's chair. That's why he knew how to stop it when none of us could." Camilla's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time that day, she had no prepared script, no polished answer. Her eyes darted between the frozen investors, all staring at the man with a mop leaning against the wall, his console still open. Malik finally stepped back, closing the panel with one deliberate motion. He turned to the glass, meeting her gaze fully. No triumph in his face, no anger, just calm recognition, the kind that cut deeper than any insult. One of the investors cleared his throat through the feed. "With all respect, Ms. Rothschild, I don't care what uniform a man wears. He just saved our portfolios from public ruin. That's what I call leadership." The words struck harder than any accusation. The cameras captured Camilla's stiffened posture, her veneer of superiority slipping like a mask half peeled. She turned sharply on her heel and motioned to her assistants. "Cut the feed." But another voice rang out, Julian's, louder this time. "Number, let them see this. All of it." His hands shook, but his expression was firm. Camilla froze, stunned by his defiance. He had never challenged her before, but the balance of power in the room had shifted, and even she could feel it pressing down. Malik bent to pick up his mop, his movements unhurried, his silence louder than words. He didn't need to explain. His work spoke for him, more brutally honest than any speech. Naomi's napkin pressed against his chest with every breath, reminding him why he chose this path. Not for revenge, not for recognition, but because some lessons had to be lived in front of others. Dignity could be invisible, but today, invisibility had become undeniable strength. In the corner of the boardroom, a younger executive leaned closer to her colleague. "He's not just a janitor," she whispered. "He's the architect. He's the reason any of this still stands." Camilla's knuckles whitened around the broken stem of her glass. For the first time, she looked small inside her towering office. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. And Malik, without looking back, began to push his cart down the marble corridor. His shoulders were steady, his steps measured. The fortress had been tested. The fortress had been saved, but not by its queen, by the man she had dismissed as low class. The silence he left in his wake was heavier than any speech, and every person who witnessed it knew the truth. Power had just shifted, and nothing in Atlas Corp would ever feel the same. The silence in the aftermath was a strange kind of roar. Camilla stood stiff at the head of the table, her knuckles white on the edge of the polished wood. Behind her, the projection wall flickered once and then steadied, the restored investor feed ticking along as if the collapse had never happened. But everyone in the room knew what they had just witnessed, and more importantly, who had saved them. Julian sat back in his chair, breathless, eyes locked on Malik beyond the glass. He was the only one who didn't look confused. He looked vindicated. He had suspected it, guessed it, maybe even hoped for it. But seeing Malik's name flash across the system credentials left no room for doubt. Camilla finally found her voice, brittle and tight. "Get him out of here," she snapped. "Now! Security!" No one moved. The guards by the doors exchanged uncertain glances. Their earpieces hummed, waiting for confirmation. But hesitation froze their steps. They had seen the screens too. They had watched the janitor's fingers move faster than their entire IT team combined. Ordering him out now felt dangerous. Julian rose slowly, adjusting his tie. "With respect, Camilla," he said, his voice steadier than she had ever heard. "Removing him would be catastrophic optics. Investors just saw him restore our entire system in real time. If you try to dismiss that, you'll have more than a breach to explain." The investors on the screen nodded subtly, silent but firm in their agreement. Camilla's nostrils flared. She forced her lips into a smile again, but it was cracked glass now, every angle jagged. "Fine. If Mr. Hayes insists on making a spectacle of himself, then let's get this over with. Why don't you tell us, janitor? What exactly do you think you've done here?" Malik leaned lightly against his cart. He didn't answer right away. He let the weight of her words settle. Then he spoke, calm and steady. "I prevented your infrastructure from bleeding itself dry in front of the world." His tone was factual, unembellished. Julian stepped forward, emboldened. "He's not just a janitor, Camilla. He was director of security operations when this system was first architected. Everything we use today, every firewall, every redundant pathway, it all started with him." The boardroom erupted with murmurs, some shocked, some angry, some impressed. The investors on screen leaned forward, hungry for answers. Camilla forced a laugh, brittle and sharp. "You expect us to believe that this man, this cleaner, built the backbone of Atlas Corp? If that's true, why is he pushing a mop instead of sitting in my chair?" Malik's eyes flickered briefly. Not anger, not shame, just the weight of a memory he would never forget. "Because some things are worth walking away from," he said softly. The words landed like stones. The investors shifted uncomfortably, sensing depths in his statement that Camilla couldn't touch. Julian cleared his throat, speaking louder. "Check the archive if you don't believe him. The original directories still bear his name. You saw it yourself when the system reinitialized." Camilla's lips thinned. She knew arguing against proof was useless. Still, she tried. "Even if that's true, he abandoned us. He left. And he's been hiding here, in coveralls, pretending to be something he's not." Malik's gaze sharpened. "I never pretended. You assumed. There's a difference." The line sliced through the room, a quiet rebuke sharper than her raised voice. Even the investors on the feed leaned back, as if weighing which of them held more credibility now. The young executive in the corner, who had whispered earlier, spoke up this time. Her voice was tentative but clear. "Ms. Rothschild, with respect, we just witnessed proof. I think what the market will care about isn't what he wears, but what he did." Camilla whirled on her. "Are you questioning me?" The younger woman didn't flinch. "Number? I'm saying our survival might depend on people like him." The silence after that was deafening. Malik took the opportunity to step away from his cart, his boots soft against the marble. He didn't enter the boardroom, didn't seek their applause. He simply stood in the doorway, framed by glass and golden light. "I didn't do this for you," he said evenly. I did it for the people who don't get to sit at this table, the ones who would have lost everything if this company collapsed. Julian nodded once, almost in gratitude. The investors murmured again, but this time their focus was no longer on Camilla. It was on Malik, on the janitor whose tip jar carried more truth than the CEO's polished words. Camilla forced her smile wider, but her eyes betrayed her. For the first time, she realized she was losing control of the room, and Malik Hayes, without raising his voice, without demanding a thing, had become the center of it. The feed continued live, investors leaning forward from screens across the globe, waiting for Camilla to seize back control. But every second she stood silent stretched the gap wider. Her authority, once absolute, now dangled by a thread. Malik stood still in the doorway, framed by the glass like a portrait. He didn't look at her. He didn't need to. His presence alone spoke louder than any title she had wielded. Then a voice chimed through the speakers, cutting through the heavy silence. Calm, older, steady. Camilla. Every head in the room turned toward the sound. It was the founder's son, broadcasting in from an undisclosed location. His face filled the central screen, a man in his late 50s, sharp-eyed despite the silver at his temples. Camilla stiffened. "Elliot," she breathed, her carefully manufactured, confidence cracking further. "You're watching?" Elliot Rothschild leaned forward, his expression grave. "Of course I'm watching. I always watch when my company teeters on the edge of disaster." His voice was deliberate, unhurried. "And this wasn't your salvation." He lifted his chin slightly toward Malik. "It was his." Murmurs swept the boardroom like a tide. Even Camilla's most loyal assistants couldn't hide their unease. "Impossible," Camilla snapped, the edge of panic threading her tone. He's a janitor. Elliot cut her off, voice harder now. "He is Malik Hayes, the same man who led the data ethics recovery after the scandal 10 years ago. The same man who built the framework that kept Atlas Corp alive when regulators wanted us dismantled. You weren't even in the building then, Camilla. You were still at boarding school." Gasps erupted. One investor cursed softly under his breath. Another leaned back in his chair, whistling. Camilla's face blanched, then flushed deep red. "Why wasn't I told?" she demanded, glaring at her assistants. "Why wasn't this in any of the briefings?" But Elliot didn't let her deflect. "Because you don't listen to briefings. You listen only to yourself." He shook his head. "And today, in your arrogance, you nearly lost everything. If not for the man you mocked in front of cameras, this company would have bled out while you raised a glass." The room fell deathly silent. Malik didn't move. He didn't gloat, didn't smile. He simply waited, the folded napkin pressing firm against his chest, Naomi's words grounding him. "For Daddy's dream." Elliot's eyes narrowed. "So tell me, Camilla, what should the board think now? That our CEO can't recognize the architect of her own survival? That she values image above function?" Camilla's lips trembled as she struggled for words. "This isn't fair. He abandoned us. If he was so valuable, why did he walk away?" All eyes shifted to Malik. The question hung there, heavy, impossible to ignore. Malik finally stepped fully into the room, his boots echoing on the marble. He stopped at the edge of the table, the mop still leaning against his cart behind him. His voice was even, quiet, but carrying. "I walked away because Atlas Corp covered up the deaths of 2 QA analysts who collapsed from exhaustion. One of them was my wife." The words fell like stones into water. The ripples were immediate, gasps, shock, head snapping toward Camilla. Julian froze, his face pale, stricken with understanding. Elliot bowed his head slightly. "I knew about the death. I didn't know—" He paused. "I didn't know it was your wife, Hayes, and I'm sorry." Camilla's eyes darted wildly, desperate for an escape. "That was before my tenure," she sputtered. "You can't blame me for—" "Maybe not," Malik interrupted, his voice harder now. "But I can blame you for mocking the people who hold this place together, for thinking a mop makes a man lesser, for believing wealth makes you untouchable. Today proved otherwise." The investors on the screens nodded, several of them murmuring approval. One spoke louder, clear enough for the record. "Mr. Hayes, you have my respect. You saved us all a fortune today. More than that, you saved our trust." Camilla opened her mouth again, but Elliot's voice cut across hers. "Enough. The more you speak, the more you expose yourself." He straightened. "Mr. Hayes, on behalf of Atlas Corp, I thank you, and I'll ensure your contributions are recognized properly. You've done more for this company today than any CEO in recent memory." Malik inclined his head slightly. "I didn't do it for the company," he said. "I did it for the people who depend on it." Camilla's chair screeched as she staggered back. Her face was pale now, drained of all her earlier fire. The room no longer belonged to her. It belonged to the janitor she had called low class. And no one, not even a Rothschild, could take that truth away. The boardroom was heavy with silence, a silence so absolute it seemed to press down on every polished surface and glass wall. Camilla's breath came sharp and shallow, her manicured fingers clutching the broken stem of her glass like a lifeline. She had spent her entire life mastering optics, but here, before the people who mattered most, her image was fractured beyond repair. Malik didn't move from where he stood, calm at the table's edge. His presence was gravity itself, quiet, unassuming, but undeniable. He hadn't raised his voice once, hadn't postured or demanded recognition, and yet the investor's eyes tracked only him. Finally, Elliot's voice cut through. "This company owes you more than thanks, Hayes. We owe you restitution." The word restitution made Camilla jolt, as if the floor had shifted beneath her heels. She snapped her head toward the main screen. "You can't be serious. He's a janitor. He's not board material." Elliot's gaze was cold steel. "Neither are you, if today is any indication." The remark struck her harder than any blow. She flinched visibly, the breath caught in her throat. Her assistants tried to look anywhere else, their loyalty suddenly brittle. Julian cleared his throat, stepping closer to Malik. His voice carried more courage now, a man who'd finally chosen a side. "If you're asking me, the company doesn't just owe him restitution. We owe him relevance. Let him lead the rebuild of our systems. He knows them better than anyone." The investors began murmuring, some nodding, others folding their arms in agreement. They wanted assurance, not excuses. Camilla slammed her palm on the table. "No, that's absurd! You think I'll let a janitor dictate the future of Atlas Corp? This is my company." Malik's gaze finally lifted, steady and sharp. "It's not yours, Camilla. It never was. You inherited a fortress other people built, and when it cracked, you raised a glass instead of your hands." Her face went pale, then red, then pale again. Elliot leaned closer to his camera, his voice quiet but cutting. "Hayes, what do you want? Name it." The room braced for his demand. A seat on the board, a contract worth millions, a public apology. Anything seemed possible in that charged silence. But Malik only reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded napkin. He laid it flat on the polished table, Naomi's crayon robot smiling up at them. "All I want is this program funded. Robotics for kids, access for those who'll never touch your corner offices, but who could build something better if given the chance." The investors blinked, caught off guard by the simplicity. Julian's lips parted, a mix of awe and respect. Camilla laughed bitterly, though it rang hollow. "That's it? You save billions in market value, and you ask for crayons and toys?" Malik's eyes met hers with a weight she couldn't match. "Number. I'm asking for futures. Futures your kind forgets exist when the cameras are off." The younger executive who had spoken earlier leaned forward. "I support it. A visible, meaningful initiative. It would do more for our image than any marketing campaign." Others echoed, some reluctant, some sincere. Even Elliot gave a single nod. "Done. Consider it approved." Camilla's nails dug into the table. "You can't overrule me, Elliot." He arched a brow. "I don't need to. The board will. And after today, you'll be lucky to keep your seat warm." She staggered back, shaking her head. "You're all blind. He's manipulating you. This is some kind of stunt." Malik calmly folded the napkin again and slipped it back into his pocket. "A stunt doesn't restore a collapsing firewall. A stunt doesn't save your investors. And a stunt doesn't carry the face of a 10-year-old girl who believes her father can still do good in this world. Camilla's protest died in her throat. For a flicker of a second, her arrogance faltered. Not gone, not replaced by humility, but cracked. Cracked enough for everyone to see what lay beneath. Julian turned to Malik, his voice low but firm. "You've changed the trajectory of this place today, whether she admits it or not." Malik gave no reply. He didn't need to. His silence was the final statement, the closing argument. The investors began logging off one by one, their murmurs clear. "Smart move. Best outcome we could have hoped for. That man saved us." When the last feed cut out, the room was left in dim quiet, only the city skyline glowing through the glass. Camilla stood alone at the head of the table, her power stripped bare. Malik turned, collected his cart, and began walking away. His boots tapped softly against the marble, the mop handle rattling with each step. He had given them a future. Now he was going back to his. And though Camilla's lips trembled, no words came, because she knew the fortress had been saved, but not by her. Malik's cart rolled steadily down the corridor, its wheels whispering over marble that had witnessed humiliation, arrogance, and reversal all in one day. The hum of servers was softer now, the network breathing easier after its violent convulsions. But the tension in the air lingered. Every pair of eyes that passed him, from assistants to security staff, carried a new awareness, curiosity, respect, unease. He paused at the elevator bay, pressing the call button with deliberate calm. Behind him, muffled voices rose again in the boardroom, Camilla's sharp, brittle tone clashing with Julian's steadier rebuttals. He didn't need to hear the words. He already knew the outcome. The elevator doors slid open, and Malik stepped inside, his reflection fractured across the mirrored steel. A janitor in blue coveralls stared back at him, mop handle angled against his cart. Yet behind that simple image lived the man who had once commanded systems, safeguarded secrets, fought battles invisible to most. He wasn't returning to that life, but today, it had found him anyway. The ride down was quiet. Floor numbers blinked past, and with each one, the weight in his chest eased. By the time the elevator reached the lobby, his breathing had steadied, the vast ground floor spread before him, sunlight pouring through glass walls, the revolving doors spilling suits and ties into the city beyond. People glanced up from their phones as Malik emerged, his cart clattering slightly over the threshold. They didn't look through him this time. Heads tilted, murmurs trailed after him. Recognition spread in ripples. A young intern whispered to another, "That's him, the janitor who stopped it." Stopped what? The breach, saved the feed. Everyone's talking about it. Their words floated after him like ghosts, but Malik didn't turn. He guided the cart toward his station near the side hall, where the day's supplies waited to be restocked. Julian appeared a moment later, moving quickly to catch up. His tie was loosened, his expression still pale from adrenaline, but there was a strange light in his eyes. Respect, maybe gratitude. "Malik," he said, voice low but urgent. "I don't know how to thank you. You didn't just save the company, you saved me. If that had gone down on my watch..." He stopped, shaking his head. "I'd be finished." Malik looked at him for a long second. "You warned her," he said simply. "You tried. That's more than most." Julian gave a short, nervous laugh. "And she still silenced me, still pretended everything was fine. But you..." He trailed off, glancing at the mop cart. "Why stay here? Why hide? You could be running the whole department." Malik adjusted the handle of the mop, his voice steady. "Because titles don't protect anyone. I learned that the hardest way." He tapped the pocket over his heart where Naomi's napkin rested. "I stay here because she needs me, not a suit, not a corner office, me." Julian's throat tightened. For a moment, he seemed on the verge of saying something else, but he only nodded. "For what it's worth, I'll make sure people know what you did, whether Camilla likes it or not." "Do what you think is right," Malik said. "That's all anyone can do." Julian gave him a look filled with quiet admiration, then stepped away, vanishing into the crowd of associates hurrying back to their routines. Malik resumed his work. He replaced cleaning solution, organized supplies, wiped down counters no one noticed. His movements were steady, deliberate, grounding him after the storm. And slowly, people began to approach. A secretary slipped him a coffee with a grateful nod. A security guard gave him a firm pat on the shoulder, saying nothing but holding his gaze for a moment longer than usual. Even the same interns who had mocked him earlier carried themselves differently as they passed. No jokes, no laughter, just a quick glance filled with the awkward recognition of having misjudged someone too soon. By the time the lobby clock chimed the hour, Malik's world felt both unchanged and entirely transformed. He was still the janitor with the mop and the tip jar, yet now every person who saw him knew that was only part of the truth. He wheeled his cart toward the staff elevator, pausing once more by the jar resting on its ledge. The crayon note inside glowed in the late afternoon sun, the words tilted and uneven but powerful all the same. For Daddy's dream. Malik allowed himself the smallest smile, not for what had just happened, not for the shift in perception, but for what lay ahead, for Naomi, for her chance to build something better. He touched the jar lightly, then resumed pushing his cart forward, back into the rhythm of work. And though the fortress above him still gleamed with wealth and arrogance, the foundation beneath it now carried his quiet mark, stronger than glass, stronger than marble. Because dignity, once revealed, could never be mopped away. Evening shadows stretched long across the lobby as Malik wheeled his cart toward the exit. The glass doors glowed with fading sunlight, washing the marble floor in amber. People still whispered as he passed, some nodding quietly, others stepping aside with a respect he hadn't asked for but had earned all the same. He paused at the ledge where the tip jar still sat. It wasn't just coins and folded bills inside now. Notes, scribbled thank yous from assistants, guards, even a few executives stuffed the jar full. Words of gratitude scrawled on scraps of paper and napkins replaced the casual mockery it once attracted. Malik picked it up, turning it gently in his hand. The jar was heavier, not with money, but with acknowledgement. He slipped Naomi's napkin back inside, tucking her smiling robot among the messages. A voice broke the quiet. Julian, standing a few feet away, his tie gone, his sleeves rolled up, exhaustion clear in every line of his face. But there was relief too. "You're leaving?" he asked. Malik nodded. "My shift's over." Julian gave a short laugh, shaking his head. "You save the company, humiliate a CEO, and then clock out." He sobered, stepping closer. "You know they'll talk about this for years, right? What you did today. It won't just be a story. It'll be a turning point." Malik set the jar back down gently. "Let them talk. I've got more important things waiting." Outside, the evening air was crisp. His old sedan sat by the curb, worn but reliable. Naomi was waiting by the passenger side, her backpack slung over her shoulder, a bright grin lighting her face. She ran up as soon as she saw him. "Daddy, you're late," she teased, her voice playful. Then her eyes caught the faint weariness in his face, and her smile softened. "Long day?" "The longest," he admitted, crouching to hug her. She smelled faintly of crayons and peanut butter. But it ended the way it needed to. She leaned back, studying him. "Did you fix it? The big computer problem you said you didn't want to?" He smiled faintly. "Something like that." Naomi grinned wider, pulling out a folded flyer from her backpack. "Guess what? My robotics teacher said we might get real funding this year. A whole program, not just after school. Isn't that amazing?" Malik felt his throat tighten. He brushed a hand over her hair, steadying his voice. "It's more than amazing, kiddo. It's the start of everything." They climbed into the car. The city skyline rose behind them as he pulled away, headlights streaking into the night. For the first time in years, Malik felt lighter. Not because he had reclaimed his past, but because he had proven his present mattered just as much. Atlas Corp would recover. Camilla would lick her wounds, her power diminished. The board would argue, investors would spin, but none of that belonged to him anymore. His battlefield was smaller, quieter, yet infinitely more important. A kitchen table littered with robot sketches, a daughter who believed in him, and a future built from dignity instead of ambition. The fortress had not fallen. It had been saved, not for its queen, not for its heirs, but for the thousands who depended on its walls to stand another day. And though Malik Hayes had walked away once before, today he had shown them all. Strength doesn't wear a suit, and worth isn't measured by glass offices. Sometimes it's carried in the hands of a janitor pushing a mop, and sometimes it's written in crayon on a napkin, folded close to the heart. Subscribe, and don't miss our next story. How much could a janitor even make? Billionaire CEO sneered. Then found a $2 million check with his name on it. Trust me, you'll feel it, and tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?